الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته ومنتهى علمه وجميع ما شاء وخلق وذرع وبرع عالم الغيب وشهادة الرحمن الرحيم المالك القدوس العزيز الحكيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على دين كله ولو كره المشركون. أما بعد فيقول الله تعالى في كتابه ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. Alhamdulillah. This Jummah we want to spend a few minutes talking about Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the Quran. Uthman, the great companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, this is the book whereof there is no doubt a guidance to those who are Allah-fearing, or those who have taqwa. Uthman ibn Affan. And the reason why I mentioned Uthman and the Quran, because when you study the life of Uthman ibn Affan, you find that there's a deep connection and a deep relationship between Uthman and the Quran. And what we will mention today, inshallah, is only scratching the surface. Uthman ibn Affan, he was born in the 6th year of the elephant. Now, if you know your seerah, you know your history, you know that, like we have, our years are dated now. Like we know this is 2019, it's about to be over with, we're about to be in the year 2020. Or if you're in the Hijri calendar, this is the 1441st year after the Hijra. But in the early days of Islam, they didn't have a Hijri calendar, their years weren't dated. They would name, or they would indicate the year of someone's birth based upon a major event that took place around that person's birth. And the year of the elephant was the year in which Abraha came from Yemen and attempted to invade Mecca. And this was the year that the Prophet ﷺ was born. So anybody who was born near or around the year of the elephant, you see they say, well, he was born X amount of years before the year of the elephant, or X amount of years after the year of the elephant. And Uthman ibn Affan was born in the 6th year after the year of the elephant. So this teaches us that he was about 6 years younger than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was one of the first Muslims. He entered Islam based upon the da'wah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. When Abu Bakr Siddiq became Muslim, one of the first people he approached was Uthman ibn Affan. And as he was inviting him to Islam, the Prophet ﷺ himself happened to be walking by, and he greeted him, and he said, when are you going to give up worshiping these idols? When are you going to give up worshiping these, these sticks and stones who can't benefit you or bring you any harm, and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then Uthman ibn Affan immediately said, I bear witness that there's no God but Allah, and I bear witness that he sent you as a prophet. And so he became Muslim very early on. He was one of the first Muslims. The amazing thing about him, is that he only narrates 146 hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now think about it. He spent a lot of time with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And contrary to the way a lot of us think, it's not like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, okay, come to the masjid, I'm going to teach y'all a hadith. No, hadith was more natural than that. Somebody would say, I was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said this, or he did this, etc., etc., etc. But in spite of that, he only narrates 146 hadith. And just to give you some context of how low that number is, Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, he is reported to have narrated 5,374 hadith. And he wasn't one of the early Muslims. He was one of the later Muslims. He only spent about 2.5 years with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as opposed to 23, like Uthman ibn Affan. Abdullah ibn Abbas, he narrates 2,660 hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nobody comes close to Abu Hurairah when it comes to hadith, as far as the amount of narration. Aisha narrates 2,210 hadith. Abdullah ibn Umar narrates 1,630 hadith. We said Uthman ibn Affan, 146 hadith. The amazing thing about it is that one of the hadith that Uthman narrates, you can find in Bukhari, in the section of the Fada'il of the Quran, the merits of the Quran. Uthman ibn Affan narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Khayrukum man ta'allama al-Quran wa 'allama." The best of you is one who learns the Quran and teaches it. That's one of the hadith he narrates. Again, we're talking about this relationship between Uthman ibn Affan and the Quran. خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَ. The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. And he was one of the few Sahaba that not only memorized the entire Quran during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, but he himself recited what he had memorized, the entire Quran, back to the Prophet ﷺ himself. Uthman ibn Affan was one of the first, or the first, Sahaba to make hijrah, to migrate for the sake of Allah. He migrated from Mecca to Habasha, to Abyssinia. Him and his wife, Ruqayya. Ruqayya who? Ruqayya bint Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was married to the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ruqayya. And then after Ruqayya died, during the Battle of Badr, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when it was time to fight at the Battle of Badr, he commanded Uthman to stay behind and take care of his wife. When the Battle of Badr was over, he got a portion of the spoils of war. And so because of that, he is counted among the companions who fought at the Battle of Badr, even though he didn't fight at the Battle of Badr. He stayed in Medina taking care of his wife, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, Ruqayya, who died during this battle. This is extremely important for what we're going to mention later on. And it's important to also understand that the Sahaba, just like all people, have ranks and levels and degrees. We're all not the same. I know a lot of us don't like to hear that. We're all not the same. Not only are we all not the same before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based upon our taqwa, but even amongst ourselves, we're not the same. Someone who does a lot, who sacrifices everything for the people, is not the same as someone who doesn't sacrifice anything. We're not the same. And likewise, the companions amongst themselves, they're all not the same. All of the companions are not regarded equally. They have ranks and levels. And this is the way they saw themselves. This is not what somebody came along later and said about them. This is the way they understood themselves. And amongst the highest ranking of the companions are those who fought at the Battle of Badr. So even though Uthman ibn Affan didn't fight at the Battle of Badr, he's still counted as those who fought. And when his wife Ruqayya died, the Prophet ﷺ married him to another one of his daughters, Kulthum. And then sometime after that, Kulthum died. The Prophet ﷺ told him, if I had another daughter available for you to marry, I would marry you to her as well. And it was because of him marrying two daughters of the Prophet ﷺ that he's given the honorific title Dhun Nurayn, the possessor of two lights. Who are the two lights? Ruqayya and Kulthum. He's the only one in the history of mankind that married two daughters of the Prophet. And النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سعيد أهد وأبو بكر وعمر وعثمان فرجف بهم فضربه برجله فقال أثبت أهد فإنما عليك نبي وصديق وشهيدان رواه البخاري. It was narrated on authority of Anas ibn Malik that one day the Prophet ﷺ climbed up or ascended the mountain of Uhud, and Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman was with him. Uhud began to shake. Uhud, the mountain, began to tremble. The Prophet ﷺ hit it with his foot and said, "Be firm, Uhud. Verily, there is a prophet, a Siddiq, a truthful one, and two martyrs on you." In other words, a prophet himself, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a Siddiq, a truthful one, Abu Bakr, and two martyrs, Umar and Uthman. This is one of the times where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam foretold the future that Umar and Uthman will be martyred. They will be considered from amongst the shuhada, those who died for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن السادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Like we said, we're only scratching the surface there are a lot of things that we can mention about Uthman. But we're focusing on his connection with the Quran. During the battle against Musaylimah the liar, and it's easy for me to remember the name of the battle. It's called the Battle of Yamama. It's easy for me to remember because when we was younger, we used to have jokes, you know, your mama this, your mama that. So it's easy for me to remember that. Yamama. This battle was called Yamama. And during this battle, over 70 Qur'an, 70 memorizers and reciters of the Quran were killed. And because of this, Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, suggested that they also begin to collect the Quran in book form. And a lot of even Muslims really don't understand what took place because the Quran is transmitted from person to person, not by what's on the paper, but what's memorized. You can't be considered a hafiz of Quran unless you recite the entire Quran from memory in front of your teacher. And these people were killed. Many of these people were killed. So Umar suggested that we also begin to collect the Quran in Mus'haf, book form, in pages. Abu Bakr's first response was like, no, this is a bid'ah. He literally used that word. This is an innovation. The Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, I'm not going to do it. Then he convinced them that this was a praiseworthy innovation. And he commissioned Zayd ibn Thabit to collect the Quran in the form of a mushaf, in book form, in the order that the chapters and verses are supposed to be. When this project was completed, this one mushaf, after Abu Bakr died, he gave it to Umar. Copies would be made from this. Now, at the time, you have to understand, those of you who know Arabic, just give you an example, the letters Ba, Ta, Tha, and Nun, they look exactly alike, except for the number of dots, nukat, that the letter has, and where those dots are, above or below. At this time, those letters, they didn't have any dots. When they wrote Arabic, there was no dots. Jim, Ha, and Ka look exactly alike. Sin and Sheen look exactly alike. Sod and Dog look exactly alike. Because there were no dots written. Not only were there no dots to distinguish the letters that looked alike, there were no halakha, there were no vowels, there were no fatha, dhamma, kasra. It didn't exist at the time. But the Arabic was so strong and pure, those who knew how to read knew how to pronounce it properly. So this standardized mushaf, this Quran in book form, on paper, was passed from Abu Bakr to Umar, and then when Umar died, it was passed to the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, the daughter of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Hafsa. When Umar died, and Uthman became the Caliph, the ruler of the Muslims, and Islam had began to spread very far during Umar's time. The Ajam, the non-Arabs, obviously began to learn Arabic because they're Muslim. They try to get this connection to the Quran. But because they weren't native Arabic speakers, and there's no dots distinguishing the letters, nor are there any vowels letting you know if it's A or U, people begin to mess up the Quran. And on top of that, People have their own personal copies of the Quran, and they begin to write notes in the margins. And so these new Muslims can't distinguish what's actually Quran and what's actually someone's notes. And so Uthman had that Quran that was preserved in the house of Hafsa, and he commissioned once again Zayd ibn Thabit to make several copies from this copy and have all of the other ones destroyed. And so this is the Quran that reaches us today. And this is what they call Mushaf Uthmani, the Uthmanic text. People that don't know this history say, well, this Quran that you have is not what Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had with him. Uthman made that up. But they don't know this history. And not only that, what we have with us represents the ijma' of the Sahaba, the consensus of the companions of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who were there when the Quran was being revealed. So you see, even in the collection of the Quran, you have right there Uthman ibn Affan. And I'm reminded of a particular time when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made dua. And you know, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his dua is mustajab, is accepted. Many times when he would raise his hand in dua, sometimes Allah will answer that prayer even before he put his hands down for making the dua. It's amazing. I pray some of you experience that, at least sometimes in your life, where you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, and before you finish asking for it, he gives it to you. That should increase us in our faith. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on this one occasion, he prayed to Allah that his community, his ummah, will not be overtaken or destroyed by drought or famine. And he said Allah answered that prayer. And he also prayed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not destroy his ummah by being attacked from outside forces. And Allah answered that dua. And at the same time, he also prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that his ummah will not be afflicted by internal strife, beef, fighting amongst each other. And Allah did not answer that dua. And this always reminds me, because sometimes we become Muslim and we forget that we're human beings. And as Muslims, when we come around the Muslims, when there's arguments, when there's disagreements, when there's beef, or this person doesn't like that person, we say, oh man, I don't know what's wrong with the Muslim. It's not the Muslims, it's human beings. When you go to work, there's people you don't like at work. When you go home in your own family, there's certain people that you disagree with, argue with. Sometimes people hate each other in their blood. It's just the human nature. So we should not be surprised or disheartened when there's disunity amongst the Muslims. Of course, it makes us feel some type of way, but I mentioned this just to remind us that the Prophet ﷺ predicted this. He asked that it wouldn't happen, and Allah didn't answer that. So this, even in our adversities, our faith, our iman in the Prophet ﷺ should increase. And subhanAllah, Uthman ibn Affan, several years ago, some of you were here, you remember, we learned the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi at Masjid in Monroeville. Sheikh Muhammad Yaqubi related it to us. I missed another narration of it last week in Atlantic City with the Sheikh in Atlantic City. His name escapes my mind at the time. I intended on going. But one of the things that stand out to me about that text in the commentary, this Shama'il Muhammadiyah, the characteristics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, written by Imam Tirmidhi. And in there he has a section about the khatam, the ring of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This ring that he had made that said Allah Muhammad Rasul, Allah Rasul Muhammad on it, right? He would wear on his finger, then after a while he stopped wearing it as a ring, and he would use it to imprint or seal his letters. And one of the things in the commentary about that always stuck out to me is how when he would have letters sent out to the different rulers, the different tribal chiefs, he would seal his letter with it. Like you have an official seal, like they put the imprint on it, same thing. And then when Abu Bakr became the Khalifa, he would seal his letters with the same ring. Umar, the same thing. Uthman, the same thing. But the amazing thing about Uthman ibn Affan, see, Uthman ruled for 13 years. In the 10th year, he was sitting by a well, and he sealed the letter. And I'm making body gestures like seal like we do nowadays, but it was a little bit more intricate then. They would have wax and pour it over it. But in any case, right? He sealed the letter, and he was passing the ring back to the companion who would keep the ring. There's a Sahaba who actually his job was the keeper of the ring of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he went to pass it back to him, the ring fell down in the well. The ring fell down in the well. And wells are deep. And Uthman ibn Affan had people go down in the well looking for the ring. They couldn't find it. And the scholars say that the trouble that Uthman had in his Khalifa started literally on that day that he lost the ring. And this kind of like tells you the barakah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this is why people, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would cut his hair, people would pick up the Sahaba would pick up his hair and keep it, put it in their water, because there's barakah. There's blessings in keeping the relics or things that were once attached to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A lot of modernist rebels try to negate that and say that this is some kind of innovation. The Sahaba would do it. You say that they were practicing blameworthy innovations? We have proof of that in the Quran. Prophet Yaqub had his sight restored to him when the shirt of his son, Prophet Yusuf, was put over his eyes. See, these are people that are like really secularists in their thinking. They think that the spiritual world and the physical world are two completely different things, and they're not attached. They are attached. And so this ring was lost. And Uthman's troubles began. People began to slander him. And this is a big lesson for us. What, any kind of people, the Sahaba, people that know him from way back in the day, began to slander him? No. New shahadas. Remember, the Muslim Ummah grew. It's not just Mecca and Medina anymore. You got Sham, Persia, North Africa, Egypt. You got all these people. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died. Abu Bakr ruled for 2.5 years. I'm trying to show you this is not a long time. Islam is fresh. Mecca and Medina, even all of the Arabs aren't Muslim yet at the time of the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr rules for 2.5 years. That's been 3 years. Umar rules for 10 years. Uthman rules for 13 years. This is not a long time. Some of us have been Muslim longer than that. Think about that. The Prophet ﷺ was a prophet for 23 years. Then plus the years I just mentioned. Some of us have been Muslim longer than that. And look at our knowledge and practice. We have everything laid out in front of us. We don't have to get on a donkey and go for several months to go collect one hadith. We download it to our phone. someone that had an agenda. His name was Abdullah ibn Sabah. He was from Sana'a, Yemen. He began to slander Uthman. And he had a reason to do it. I don't want to mention some names, but there's some reports that some of these rap beefs, one of the big rap beefs in history, it got started the same way. Someone was a big rap star, then this up-and-coming rapper, tried to, what's up, what's going on? And he gave him the cold shoulder. And that allegedly started one of these big rap beefs. Something similar happened to Uthman ibn Affan. Uthman was receiving visitors. And this man, Abdullah ibn Sabah, came in. He was a big scholar. He used to be a Jewish scholar, come from Yemen. He came, and he expected the red carpet and all of these beautiful things. And Uthman didn't give him the cold shoulder. He greeted him. Anything I can do for you? Oh, okay. Who's next? Who wants to see me next? He looked at that as what we would call shade. And so because he's a scholarly type of person, he knows the history of Quraysh and all of these things. He knows about the inner feuding of the Quraysh between Bani Umayyah and Bani Hashim, the Prophet's tribe, which is Bani Hashim, and Abu Sufyan's tribe or clan, which is Bani Umayyah, and he knows all of these things. So what does he do? He tries to use his personal agenda and tries to slander Uthman. When he does it in the centers of Islamic learning, like Mecca and Medina, you still got a lot of Sahaba living in it, like, get out of here with that stuff. Bro, what am I trying to hear that? But then he makes his way to Egypt. And this should teach us how dangerous half knowledge is. Because when you have knowledge, no context is dangerous. Because the best lies have a little bit of truth in it. One of the things that he began to slander Uthman with, he tried to say Uthman was a coward. He didn't fight at the Battle of Badr. I just told you earlier that the Prophet ﷺ commanded him not to fight at the Battle of Badr. And he's still considered one of those who fought at Badr, even though he didn't physically fight. I just told that to you. But if you knew and you don't know all of this background information, and you say, oh, he didn't fight at Badr, he's a coward. And you say, word? Did Uthman fight at Badr? No, he didn't fight. Oh, how you gonna lead us? They accused him of putting all of his family in charge, Bani Umayyah. Because when you look at the Muslim world at the time, many of his family were amirs and governors. Look at, yeah, they are all related. But what's the other half of the story? He didn't put them in charge. Umar put them in charge. And Umar's not from that family. But again, half truth. You don't have a foundation in the Quran. They tried to say that he was spending the Baytul Mal, the Muslim treasury. He was taking the money from there and spending it on his family. Basically, he was stealing. That's what they accused him of. And we have in our books of Hadith where Uthman is actually literally defended himself on the minbar. He actually get on the minbar and defended himself. The money he was spending was his own money. Uthman was rich, and that's well known. One of his honorific titles is Al-Khani, Uthman Al-Khani. Uthman was rich during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and after it. I want to tell you some more stories, but we don't have time. Uthman's money is still benefiting the Ummah today. There was a man, because in Medina you have wells. It ain't like you just turn on the tap like you got now and get water. You have to go to a well and get your water. So many of the wells in Medina, they didn't have a lot of water, because water comes from underground as well, not just what you see, rivers and lakes and stuff, right? So if you dig anywhere deep enough, you're going to come to water. So many of the wells in Medina, they wouldn't have a lot of water. They would go dry periodically. But there was this one well that was owned by someone that never went dry. But he would inflate the prices. He would raise the prices up to everyone. So Uthman ibn Affan, he went to him and tried to buy the well from him. This is during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was like, nope, nope. He kept driving the prices up. Nope, nope, nope. And he charged, and then he charged Uthman an astronomical price. And he said, no, I'm not selling this well at all. Uthman said, okay, well let me buy half of it from you. In other words, you set the price on half of the days I get it, half of the days you get it. And so he made this astronomical price. Uthman accepted it. So Uthman ibn Affan, he goes out and tells everybody, I bought this well from this man. I own 50% of it. I own half of it. On my days, everyone can get water for free. And so, naturally, on those days, everybody got water on Uthman's days, but on the days that belonged to the other man, nobody got water. So the man recognized Uthman. He's sharp. He's very sharp. So he sold the other half to Uthman eventually. And when he did this, the Prophet ﷺ said, you're going to get Jannah. This is what the Prophet ﷺ promised Uthman Jannah many times. And this is one of those times. And believe it or not, this well is still producing not only water, but greenery grew around there, and dates grew, and the dates are being sown. When those dates come from that area, which is near Masjid Qiblatain, the Masjid of the two Qiblas, that's another story we don't have time to get into. But in any case, it's near that masjid. And when and all of the produce and everything that came from that well is sold, the money goes back there. And it's an endowment. It's called the Waqf. And people are still benefiting from it today. Uthman ibn Affan. So Uthman was rich. And so a group of people, an army of people, literally, a mad mob, came to Medina and laid siege to Medina. Their intention was to kill Uthman. They was non-Muslims? No, they were Muslims. Who? Just anybody? A companion of the Prophet ﷺ? Yes. They laid siege to his house for 40 days. A lot of people don't understand. People think, and Uthman by this time was 82 years old. He was the Khalifa. He didn't have control of the city. They took over the city based upon this slander. Even that well we just talked about, they wouldn't let him go to that well. They laid siege to his house, and he fasted for each of those 40 days. And then on the 40th day, Yom Jum'ah, he had taken a nap. And in that nap, he had a dream of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in that dream, not only was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but Abu Bakr and Umar were also in that dream. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him in that dream, he said, won't you break fast with us tonight? So in his mind, that was a glad tiding that this is the day I'm going to be martyred. And so he told all of the people who were guarding his house. He had servants, his wife was in his house, and outside of his compound, you had Al-Hassan al-Hussein and Muhammad ibn Talha. These are great Sahaba, companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the grandchildren of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, guarding his house. He told everybody, don't nobody shed no blood on my behalf. Whatever's going to happen, just let it happen. And then his servants inside the house was like, no, we're going to defend you. Then he said, no, don't defend me. Whoever promises not to defend me, I automatically grant you your freedom. Some of the rebels climbed over the back wall. They snuck past the security. One of them grabbed his beard. And he said to him, let go of my beard. Your father used to respect this beard. And this person, at that moment, he made tawbah and he left. But the other people, they came in the room. And when you read the details of how they killed him, it'll make you cry. He opened a mushaf in front of him to start reading right before they killed him. SubhanAllah. At one point, they chopped off one of his arms or his hands. And Uthman said to them, the hand you just chopped off was the first hand to write the Quran down. His wife, Naeem, went in to defend him. They chopped off one of her fingers. And she turned away and they poked him with the sword. And then when they finally killed him, she went out and screamed, they killed Uthman, they killed my husband. Ali found out about it. He hit his son. He said, how you let that happen? You're supposed to be guarding his door. They said, we don't know. He got past us. A lot of people don't understand. They weren't in control. They took over the city. These rebels. They wouldn't let them bury Uthman. They wouldn't let the Sahaba bury Uthman. You know how Uthman got buried? The wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Habiba, she got into the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said, oh you rebels, if you don't let us bury Uthman, me, the wife of the Prophet, Mu'minin, the mother of the believers, I will uncover myself and go outside and bury Uthman myself. They went and they allowed, listen to the language, they allowed Ali, Al-Hassan, Hussein, Muhammad ibn Talha to bury Uthman. Why are they carrying his body? They throwing stones at Uthman. This is how hectic it got. And they buried Uthman ibn Affan. Uthman's wife said that when she looked at the Quran that Uthman had in front of him when he was reading, his blood spilled on the ayat. And this ayat is in Surah Baqarah. فَسَيَكْفِيكُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. So Allah will suffice for you against him. And he is the all-hearer, the all-knower. In other words, Allah will deal with them for you. He is the all-hearer, all-knower. And when you read the reports about those who had a hand in killing them, all of them died miserable. They looked, their hands got paralyzed, their feet, they messed up. Each and every one of them. They died a miserable death. And so we see how the Quran came to life and avenged the death of Uthman. But we mention these things not only to just remember stories of those who came before us, but I hope we're taking lessons from these things. Because the death of Uthman and the killing of Uthman, we are still suffering from the effects of that directly to this day. The Muslim Ummah, today, yes. 1400 years later, we are still suffering from that. We are still feeling the effects of that. The Prophet ﷺ said in many different narrations that once the sword becomes unsheathed against my ummah, it won't be sheathed again until the day of judgment. In other words, once a Muslim kills another Muslim, this is going to be going on until the day of judgment. And Uthman's death was the first time that some Muslims killed a Muslim. So anytime you see Muslims killing each other, you need to think about that. And like I said, I only scratched the surface. Muslims with half information, new shahadas, thinking they're better than the ones who put in work a long time ago, before they were even born. His relationship to the Prophet ﷺ, they probably didn't even know about all that. And many of them thought they were doing something good. That's the deep thing about it. It wasn't like, okay, we so foul dudes, let's go do something foul. Okay, let's kill a Khalifa, one of the best Muslims ever. No, they thought they were doing something good. So we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us many lessons from Uthman and his connection with the Quran. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار.